Hi everyone. It's my pleasure to host this second session of the Azure AppFest following last year DataFest. Before we start to today's topic, what a best thing to start than a little contest. Francesco, if you can move the slide. Yes. So this month, upgrade your Azure skills and get rewarded with a Surface device and a career monitoring session by one of our very best senior executive at Microsoft. So I think that's awesome sessions. Also an opportunity to grow your career, not only in Azure, but in the cloud in general. Please join that challenge. The link is also posted in the chat. Right. So as I mentioned, this is the second session of a series of 6 episodes. If we can move one slide. In case you missed the first episode, you will be able to catch up and watch the recording of the first episode on containers and PaaS solutions for different solutions on running Kubernetes on Azure, as well as deploying your Java application on Spring Cloud very soon. Give us a few more days and you will have the link in the email following this session, right, to catch up with this episode and the previous one. And before we start, also a few housekeeping rules. This session is recorded and we will please ask all your questions during the presentation and the demo, right? We will address all of them at the end. We have a time for that. But yes, please do send them and we will answer as soon as possible, as well as at the end. The next slide is actually our introduction to today's session. Today we'll focus on DevSecOps, terms which is used more and more, especially in today's time, and really coming from a developer perspective, how to build secure apps on Azure with DevSecOps and GitHub. And Francesco, our very own app innovation cloud solution architect, will go through that. Over to you, Francesco.
Hi everyone. So welcome to the Azure AppFest. Today I will cover building secure apps on Azure with DevSecOps. This topic is super broad, and I decided to run on an introduction and to cover also some of the topic, but definitely I will not cover all. I try to split my presentation in a way that I will have the initial 20 minutes on some slides where I will set the proper context and give you most probably some idea of how you can introduce DevSecOps in your company. And then the second part is a demo where I will walk you through how you can use GitHub for how you can enhance your GitHub setup with DevSecOps. So yeah, let's start. So enterprise can no longer wait to address security. In fact, in today's world, it only takes 3 days for an hacker to exploit vulnerabilities. This means that if your process are not put in place to be able to remediate a vulnerability in less than 3 days, you are virtually exposed to any new vulnerability that will happen. In addition, attackers have now shift left. They are not attacking anymore just the software that is live, but they try to compromise upstream dependency and engineering system. The result is that these attacks can impact the development environment and the software supply chain, so the way that you code and your development environment. 2 examples of this were the breach that happened in CodeCov and Electronic Arts. In CodeCov, the attacker were able to change the Docker image that was used to build the CI/CD, and they start to send all the secret of more than 1,000 of customers to their own machine, and so he ended up in a huge breach of secrets. For Electronic Arts, they also succeed to exploit a problem that there were in the credential for Slack that were stored inside a cookie. And due to this secret and identity protection issue, attackers were able to steal a lot of information, including the source code of one of their games. So you might think that this is just a problem for big enterprise, but definitely is not like that. It's a problem for all of us that are developing code. So in modern software development, we all rely on open source. And almost 80% of our final package of our software is made of open source. And we don't want to say that open source is bad. We love open source. Open source is very important to speed up your development and also to avoid to reinvent the wheel. If there is already a library that is solving your problem, why should you develop by yourself? Most probably it's even better written compared to what you might try to achieve, at least in the short term. But the problem of open source is that when you write your code, you start to include some dependency. And then those dependencies are including additional dependency inside. And in the scenario where one of those dependencies has a vulnerability, then automatically your software has a vulnerability. So be able to leverage the work of thousands of open source developers means that thousands of strangers effectively have commit access to your production code. So an innocent mistake or a malicious attack to your supply chain affect you deeply. So of course, the world have changed. Attackers keep evolving. So we need to introduce a new process, new tools, and a new way to protect ourselves. So one of the key topics that we will discuss today, one of the possible solutions to address this is to shift security left. So what does it mean? It means that instead of trying to solve a security incident or a vulnerability when it's in production or after that a breach happened, of course, it's more important to start to address it at early stage of your software development lifecycle. And as we can see, if we look purely from a business point of view at cost side, if you solve an issue during development, it will cost $80. Then, if you try to solve a similar issue at production, for all the implications that there are, the remediation cost increase a lot, up until millions if it becomes a breach, and it might cause also the default of your company in some scenario. There is it's not just about a remediation cost. Overall, security to shift security left has also an additional problem. In fact, in the world, we can estimate that there are around 40 million professional developers, and there are only 70,000 security experts. This implies, of course, that there is not enough security experts and they cannot really be part of the development. So one of the key challenges of this shift left paradigm is make sure that the professional developers start to take care about security, because there is not enough security expert to perform this kind of activity. So how can we embark in this journey? One of the best approaches is to introduce DevSecOps in your organization. In the last 10 years, we have seen the Devops Revolution in many software development organizations. And DevOps, we can read the definition, is the union of people, process, and technology to deliver continuous value to user. This implied in the last 10 years the fact that many companies start to try to automate the way they build and they deploy software. If we add security to DevOps, it will transform in a evolution in the way development organization approach security by introducing a security-first mindset culture and automating security into every phase of the software development lifecycle, from design to delivery. Said so, the key objective of a DevSecOps journey are three that are listed here. One is to reduce remediation time by shifting security left. And this is what we have seen before, to try to start to fix issue as early as possible in development and be more efficient in the way that you discover issue. The second objective is to integrate with and secure your existing tool chain. And this is the part of adding the sec part inside your DevOps pipeline. And then the third one that I haven't mentioned so far is to quickly identify new threats vector. So the world of the vulnerability, all this security issue is very dynamic. A new issue might be discovered in this moment while we are talking, and it's very important that all your system, all your tools that you are using to detect vulnerabilities are keep their vulnerabilities database as updated as possible. And then you have the proper process to keep scanning your new development. So while you're coding, you are writing new code, but it's also critical that you put in place process to scan your legacy software to make sure that what is currently live and maybe you don't touch since 2 years is still secure. So for all this kind of problem, Microsoft gives a very broad set of tools to address and put in place DevSecOps in your organization. The type of offering is split in two main verticals. One is all the offering for development workflow, and the second one is for security operation. For the development workflow, you can see that GitHub is providing a lot of interesting features. For example, code space, and I will have a session in the AppFest covering also code space in 2 weeks from today. It's a tool that will help you to code in the cloud instead of the need of download the code on your local machine, and this definitely enhances security. Then GitHub repo and GitHub action give you the ability to code anywhere and everywhere. And then finally, one of the most interesting DevSecOps capability is provided by GitHub Advanced Security, that with just a couple of checkbox that you can tick on your GitHub repository, you can activate code secrets and dependency scan in your repository. On the other side, so all of this help you while you are developing code. When your code becomes live, you have additional tools that are very helpful. You have Azure AD, that is an identity management service. This helps you to put in place a zero trust security in all your organization. You might want to leverage Azure policy, where you can define a specific policy that you can apply to all your environment and check if your product and service are compliant. And finally, most probably the two most relevant tools that are the Security Center and Sentinel. And this help you to create boundaries to avoid to receive attacks from the exterior world. And also, of course, analyze logs and prevent attacks when they are happening. So all of this helps you to try to cover the three key areas where you need to work on when you try to embrace a DevSecOps journey. So the first area is enhance the way that you secure your development environment. The second one that I will cover later also in the demo is how to embed security in your developer workflow. And the third area is how to bridge the gap between DevOps and SecOps teams. As mentioned before, I cannot give you the full picture. Now I will just mention a couple of examples for each of these sections. And I invite you to please read, follow tutorial online, and please just use this as an introduction on this topic. So for the first area, that is a secure development environment, in this area, there are a lot of things that you can do. Definitely, you need to keep your computer up to date. You need to have the proper antivirus, malware, and so on. But there are even new type of attacks. So in fact, one new vulnerability that we have seen is that attackers might add some malware to a repository that you can find online. So in the moment that one developer maybe find a new library for iOS development, they would like to experience and check if this library can be introduced, he might download this repository and run it. While doing so, he might activate malware. So there are a couple of ways to remediate this kind of issue or reduce the risk to be exposed. So for example, you might want to only limit the possibility to clone a repo, and you might ask your developer only to browse it over internet. Or you can also put in place rules to have a least privilege access principle to every clone repository coming from untrusted author. So as mentioned, this is just an intro on this topic that is way broader. The second area where you need to spend effort to improve it is how you embed security in the developer workflow. Here, the answer is easy. It's you should embed the security at every step. So you should start from what you can do at development stage. In fact, there are plugin that you can add to your IDE while developing. You might want to add additional security validation during your peer review, and so on. Then, when finally the code is committed and pushed in the repository, I strongly recommend you to automate several scans that are performed with the pipelines. And here you can, for example, run some static code analysis looking for security vulnerability. You can do dependency scanning, credential scanning. If all of this is passing, then of course you will need to deploy. And here you can do additional type of scanning. You can do some other static analysis. And so you can, for example, scan a container and see if also the container is secure, because as in the example of code cove, the problem was not in the code, it was on the way that the container was built. Or, and then also you might want to do also some dynamic analysis, and for example, automate the way that you perform penetration testing after that you deploy. And finally, one of the most critical points, this is more related with the SecOps, is that is very important to monitor all the logs that are coming from your environment and make sure that you have the proper threat detection, threat intelligence, to make sure that if there is any change in the pattern of how the environment is used, it can detect a possible attack going on in that moment. The third area is more is an area where Microsoft can help you less, and it's more about culture, it's more about people, and is to bridge the divide between DevOps and SecOps teams. So as we mentioned, the security team is quite small. Maybe in a big organization there might be 10 people working, and there are 10,000 developers. And so it's very important to start this trend of start to share the responsibility of security. So avoid to keep security and developer working in silo, and start to make sure that developer understand the importance of code in a secure way, and to reduce as much as they can the number of vulnerability at early stage. How can you do this? One of our recommendations is to make sure that also developers will have a KPI that can measure their effort in trying to solve bugs. Some of the key metrics that we recommend you to track for your development team is the time to detect, the time to communicate, and the time to mitigate a vulnerability. And all of this, you should keep in mind what I said before, that there is this challenge in trying to keep this in less than 3 days. Otherwise, hacker will be faster than you. Before moving to the demo, I would like to share something that is more related with my personal professional experience from a couple of years ago. So this is an example while I was an engineering manager working for a major bank in Southeast Asia. For many of you, this can be very common, what I'm going to describe, but for people that may be working in startup, or they're not familiar with enterprise organization, or even they are just a junior developer, this might be new, and also it can help you understand the importance of DevSecOps. So at that time in the bank, we have hundreds of developers working on this new mobile banking app. And we had the 3 release that we were working at every time. So let's assume this release was supposed to go live mid-March. This release should go live mid-April, and this release mid-May. So at the same time, my teams were working in parallel to development of the May release, SIT of April release, and UAT. Of course, at the end of our release, we were all happy that finally we were closing all the severity 1 and 2 bugs, and we were very close to release to production. And of course, we were stressed working on other release. But what was happening is that exactly in that moment, at the end of UAT, we were receiving a big report about security issue. Why it's happening like this? Because a bank needs to comply with a lot of regulation. And one of the key regulations for the InfoSec team was to make sure that this report contained no severity 1 and severity 2 vulnerability that we were exposing. This report was very expensive. They had a full team, an external team of people that were doing automated testing, but also manual penetration testing. And it was very cool to see also how they were acting. But definitely for us as development team, it was a nightmare. It was maybe 3-4 days before go live, and we had to spend a lot of time to sitting with the security team, read the 500 page of a report. Maybe there were a lot of vulnerabilities that was just false positive or very low priority, not really relevant. So you were starting to have a lot of conversation. On the other side, the security team might not fully understand how to solve the implication from a development point of view. And sometimes also you have to spend a lot of effort to fix them. Sometimes it was a genuine bug. You don't want to go live with a security breach, a possible security breach. And so you might ask your development team to spend a full weekend to fix it. And that's not nice. So what we are trying to do today with DevSecOps is try to anticipate this, start to look at the security, start at the early stage of development. And in this way, given to our analysis, this report definitely will be reduced up to 80% of the bugs, of the security vulnerability, will be already solved in early step. So, and also, if you make sure that everybody in the development team is aware about security, in the moment that you receive this report, or in the moment that you work together, you see it more like a collaboration instead of a fight, because you start to make sure that the 2 teams are going to the same direction. Instead of I develop code, they look for vulnerabilities. So, and also my last point before moving to the demo is that I'm not saying that this kind of reports are bad. I am a big fan of this, and the type of scan that they can perform are different from the scan that you can perform on development, because definitely what you do here, it should be fast, it should be integrated in your pipeline. And also the type of tools might be different from the one, and should be different from the one that you use in UAT. So what I discovered in my personal experience that as many tools as you use, better it will be the overall analysis and the overall finding that you can discover in your code. So I definitely recommend you to keep thinking about how to diversify. Don't just rely on one single product, one single type of scanning. And this is something that also I will show you during the demo. Last point is that there is a lot of content that you can read about DevSecOps. I encourage you to check the Microsoft DevSecOps page, and there you will find also those additional links for the GitHub Advanced Security feature. You can find this book with some tips on how to integrate security in DevOps. And also you can, I invite you to check the Azure Architecture Center, and there you can find around 20 DevOps and DevSecOps architecture you can leverage, both with GitHub, but also with Azure DevOps. I guess the link will be shared in the comment. So now let's go to its demo time, and let's start to speak about what I would like to walk you through. So I have created a repository with a very basic Node.js application. This Node.js application is full of bugs and full of vulnerabilities, and I spent time to keep adding vulnerabilities with the objective of showcase to you how to solve those. Then, after I have created this application, I have enabled GitHub Advanced Security in the repo, and this gave me 3 tools. One is the GitHub Dependabot, then and secret scan that are running automatically. And then I have also integrated the CodeQL, that is the engine that is performing the code scanning. These are required to run on top of GitHub Action, and GitHub Action is the engine that runs pipeline in GitHub. My GitHub Action are divided. The type of check that I have had in terms of DevSecOps are of 2 types. So when there is a new pull request, I will trigger 4 checks. I will build the code, I will test it. I will run some code quality scan with Solar Cloud, and also I will run CodeQL. When finally this PR is pushed, I will trigger my CI/CD, and my CI/CD will build the image, and then before uploading the image, I'm doing an additional scan that is a container scan that check if the container itself is adding vulnerabilities. And this scan is not part of GitHub Advanced Security. It's a free GitHub action that you can find. It's provided by Azure and is built on top of several open source tools. Then, if this is successful, we will upload the package to GitHub repository. And then when this is uploaded, I will upload my container to App Service. App Service is a platform as a service tool, platform as a service application that is able to run container and code. And it's very user-friendly to leverage, and also enable you to deploy container online without caring too much about the infrastructure, with a different tool to auto-scale and also enhance reliability without caring too much about the infrastructure. A feature that I'm leveraging of App Service is the ability to have a development slot and also a production slot inside the same infrastructure. After I deploy to App Service, I will also use another open source tool to run some penetration test. And then if all of this is successful, it will ask me if I can approve and deploy to the production App Service slot. So this is my repository. As I told you, this is a Node.js application, and it's full of bugs, and also is containerized with Docker. When it is deployed, it's deployed in this app service environment, and this is the development slot, while this one is the production slot. The difference, as you can see from the URL, is just this dash development. Before going to the details about this DevSecOps repository that I have created, I would like to go one step above and show you my organization. So my organization in GitHub have this security overview tab. And this is very, very important for many InfoSec people, because it can provide a very quick overview of all your repository and quickly check the critical code scanning secret and dependency issue in your repository. So if there is if you need to anyway keep yourself up to date, if you want to quickly see if there is any critical issue, in this way you can check all the repository that are in GitHub. Going back to DevSecOps, now, yeah, I will go inside this overview, and this is generated when you activate GitHub Advanced Security. The way to activate is pretty straightforward. It just requires to tap some of these checkbox. So it's pretty, in a couple of minutes you will be able to activate. So what are we going to see here? We are going to see dependency, code, and secret alert. But one point that I would like really to highlight is that keep in mind that security is a very dynamic topic. It's not something that you can do today and then you can forget for months. So the very important point of having this kind of security overview is that you will be able to see new vulnerabilities while you are coding, but also you will be able to get alert when a new vulnerability is discovered, even if you are not maintaining this product anymore, even if you are out for Chinese New Year holiday, or after 2 years that you went live and you forgot about this project. So this is one of the, in my point of view, killing feature of this type of scan that are performed with advanced security. Let's see in details the different type of alerts. So dependent bot is a tool that runs automatically underneath and will create a dependency graph of all the dependencies that are listed in your package.json or Maven file. And inside it will show to you the type of vulnerability that is found, the impact, and also how you can fix those vulnerabilities. And if this is a very critical vulnerabilities, it will even open a pull request with the recommended change that should be performed. In reality, I always encourage you to, first of all, check out this branch and run it locally. Don't just click merge, definitely, but this helps you anyway to having an additional alert that something should be updated in your code. The second part is about the secret. The second type of alert is a secret scanning. Secret scanning is helping you to detect another big problem during development, that people might tend to hard-code password, connection string, and so on, and secret inside the code. So this will help you identify those. GitHub Advanced Security is already trained to detect up to 40 different types of password, and you can also configure your custom your regex to find your custom password. Yeah, I can show you this password is not really correct, so don't worry, don't waste time to copy it. But it's still happen, and this is you might think that is not a big deal, but it's a serious problem, and it can cause a lot of security breach. And the last part, the last type of alerts is the one related to the code that you are writing. So in this case, he found 6 different code scanning alerts, and the one that I want to show you is this one, arbitrary file write during zip extraction. So this is a vulnerability that I add on purpose to the code, and the important thing is that it will show you where the vulnerability, the file where the vulnerability is, and also what is the problem. It will explain you the context about this vulnerability and also give you a recommendation on how to fix, and even example on how to fix this vulnerability. And in case you really want to even learn more, you can also open additional reference about it. So before starting the exercise of trying to fix this vulnerability, I would like to clarify one point. Dependable and secret scan are performed automatically. Code scanning requires a pipeline that is run. I will show you now the pipeline. The pipeline is this one, named CodeQL, and I will walk you through this pipeline. So this pipeline is automatically generated when you activate the code scanning, and this is configured to be triggered in 3 steps. So when you push the code to master, when you create a pull request to master, and also you can schedule it. And this, in this case, will run every week at 3:44 a.m. UTC time. You can customize this as you think is the best way. You can do it every day, every week, every month, but definitely you can still run it frequently and get vulnerability, even if you are not maintaining the code. Then when I create this pipeline, GitHub was able to detect that I'm using only JavaScript, and then he add JavaScript to the language that it should be scanned. But there are also other languages that you can support, like C++, C#, Go, Java, JavaScript, Python, and Ruby. And it can perform scan with both or multiple languages at the same time. When the scan will be completed, then the report that is generated, it will be pushed to the security tab. Okay, so let's try to solve one of these security vulnerability. What I'm going to do is a little bit in the interest of time. I will just show you the overall step. Please don't do exactly what I'm doing. Some are not best practice, and I will also explain you why. So let's assume my manager assigned me to fix this issue. Definitely, I would like to see where it is, and I will read about it. Since this is a demo, of course, I already know where I should go. So it's inside the lib folder, is inside this specific file. And in reality, I will open Visual Studio Code and I will clone this repo. But here I will just add it live. Please don't do this at home. And it was mentioning me to go around the line 260 something. And here I already prepare my patch. So I just need to comment this line and uncomment this one. In reality, you will need most probably also to spend some time debug this code, check a possible fix, and then also definitely run a regression to see if it's still performing the same functionality that you want to implement. Then, of course, you will commit your code, and I want to create a new patch. So I committed the code, and before creating a pull request, I would like to add a very small change to make sure that when we will deploy, we will be able to see that the code have changed. So I will also go inside my express route, and I will change in exactly the same branch that I think it was patch 8, I want to change my index response. So here I will just add AppFest 2022. And I will also commit this. Now it's time definitely to create a pull request. You can see how the dependent bot also show you this kind of warning and keep you reminded if there are issues that are happening. So to create a pull request in GitHub, I go to the pull request section, I compare and pull. It will merge the patch 8 to the master branch. And now when I click create pull request is when the magic of GitHub action are happening. In fact, it automatically will start to trigger all of my pipeline. And one of the very important feature of GitHub action in this case is the ability to run in parallel. I already show you the CodeQL pipeline. What I would like also to show you is this build test scan pipeline that I have added. So I will go in the details. This you can see are the logs of the pipeline running. Also, it's performing both in parallel. So okay, I want to, before showing the logs, I want to show you the workflow file. So also in this case, it's a trigger every time there is a pull request to master. And then there are two jobs independent. One is performing build and test in Node. And the second one is also performing the Sonar Cloud scan. What I've added here is also I have added two tools for check password and to run antivirus. Those are two open source offerings. And again, I know that I have also some secret scan offered by GitHub, but it's always better to have a broad and diversified set of tools. And especially if you can find some very good open source tooling, I recommend you to use it. This is please don't pick this as my recommended one. I just pick someone, but try always to try to diversify your tooling. So let's see how the pull request is going. So what I'm waiting here is to see the report from Sonar Cloud that will be published as one of the comment inside this pull request. I'm expecting Sonar Cloud to fail because there is a code smell that will be detected. But the overall point here is that you can configure the pull request to fail or not. You can define your own branch policy, and based on that, you should decide if you want to accept or not the ability of have some security findings during your development or not. What my personal recommendation is that doing a really early stage development, doing the development of a task, you can be more open-minded to security findings. So you don't want to block the merge of a feature if there are still some findings. But then, for example, if it is the end and you are merging the feature to your main branch, at that time, definitely you should enforce all these checks to be successful. So you can see that Sonar Cloud analysis is complete and also published via Sonar Cloud bot. This is an example of integration in GitHub that you can have. So since this is just a demo, I will proceed to merge this pull request. And then I can show to you how the CI/CD pipeline is working. So you can see that there are those two actions that were added in the queue, and they are already ongoing and working in parallel. So one is again the CodeQL that is running. And the second one that is available is the CI/CD, and this is the one that I want to explain you and walk you through. So this was created from a wizard, and I select web app, Azure web app for container, and it generates most of this. And the key activity that is doing, there are 3 jobs. The first one is building the Docker image. Before building, you need to log into GitHub container registry. You build the image. And then here is where I added an additional container scan. And I will show you later the logs. The findings that that can be discovered are very interesting. Since this is a demo, I add this flag to continue on error. In fact, there are a lot of vulnerability. And in reality, this should be stop here, and then you will need to fix them. By adding this, you can proceed and also push the Docker, and then proceed with the CI/CD pipeline. If this step build is successful, then I will be able to go to the next job, deploy dev, and this will deploy to this environment that is development, where the main activity that I will do is this GitHub action that allow me to deploy to Azure Web App. You can see how with a few lines I can deploy to the development slot. And here I would like also to highlight an additional step, the fact that I'm not using a GitHub secret for my publish profile. This is what I'm doing here at this step. This is a GitHub secret. But instead, here I decide to show you how you are retrieving a secret from Azure Key Vault. And Key Vault is a very interesting offering from Microsoft that enable you to store in a secret way password, a certificate, and so on. And this is one of the ways that you can retrieve it and use it inside a GitHub action. And then finally, when the code is deployed, I will run a Zap scan. That is another open source tool. It's not part of Microsoft, but it will help me to perform some penetration testing on the URL that I just deployed. If all of this is successful, I will repeat a similar step and deploy to production. And in this case, the only big difference is that this production environment is protected. So it requires specifically the approval, in this case of me, but it can be of, for example, the SIT, UIT, or production owner, to be able to deploy. So you can first check that everything is working, and then you will be able to move forward. So let's see how this action is performing. So we are here. We can see that it's still deploying to dev. I can take just a few seconds to show you the type of findings that was found in the container scan. So here there are a lot of different type of vulnerability that was discovered. So that's why it's also very important to add additional tool. And then we can see in the deploy dev that is performing the Zap scan. So if it deploy to the web app, we should be able, by refreshing, to see this 2022 message. Yeah, and that's the case. When the Zap scan will be performed, I will be able to see that that this step is completed, and then it will show me to approve or reject this deployment. Since we don't have enough time, I will just show you an example of this. So this is exactly what we will see later. So it will put this pipeline on idle mode, and then I will be able to approve and deploy this deployment live. So in the interest of time, since I don't think he complete this, no, he already complete. Okay, so yeah, this is the example, review pending, and I will approve it. And now it will also start to trigger the deploy to production. Last things I want to highlight to you is that now this code scanning about the zip issue was fixed. I will quickly go back to the presentation with my last 2 slides before the Q&A. So it's definitely the right time to start this journey to introduce DevSecOps, shift security left, and also unite your security and development team. From what we have noticed so far, there are still many companies that have embarked in this journey. In fact, 62% of enterprise do not integrate security in the development phase yet. 58% of security and development team are still working in silos. And this definitely is a shame because, as we have seen, it's you can see the advantage of bringing DevSecOps inside your pipeline and in your development lifecycle, and you will have a different type of rewards. For example, you will be able to reduce the security incident up to 80% when fixing them in development. And on the other side, as we have seen before, the cost to fix incident in production is usually 60 times more compared to solve it in development. So, as mentioned before, it's please consider to kickstart your DevSecOps practice with this GitHub and Azure offering. And I just would like to remind you the key benefit, in my point of view, of this new architecture. So this is definitely a very mature offering with a completeness of security feature, both for the development side and also on the security of operation. It's very well integrated. In some cases, you might have one tool for code scanning, one tool for secret. You then have to integrate all the information. Each tool is generating its own report. While in this case, you have all the information just in one place. And then, as we have seen, it's very easy to set up. And then all the information, maybe this I didn't stress before, all the information that you can see in the security overview can also be exported to Azure Security Center. So you can have an overall overview about the status of your code. So that's all from me. Now I would like to start the Q&A session. Sorry for being a couple of minutes late. Yeah. Thank you,
Francesco. Let me ask you a question. There's a bit of echo. I think the first question was around how many of these tools, including GitHub Action, DST, and Sonar, require additional subscription or cost in order to enable?
So GitHub Action requires an additional subscription unless you have a public repository. But it's better that you check about it. But definitely you might need to, especially if you want to apply for your private repository, you will need an additional license. Sonar Cloud also requires a license if you are using on a private repository, but a lot of other tools that I have used, for example, the Azure Container Scan and also the Zap proxy, it's open source and you can leverage, and you can find the equivalent of this tool, maybe less update, a little bit less performant, but you can find them as open source. So I think it might be challenging, not perfect, but you can set up something similar to what I've done also with the only open source tools.
Okay. Does DevSecOps complement Sentinel?
Yeah, definitely. Sentinel is more used to analyze the logs that your environment is producing in a live scenario. while DevSecOps is performing a different type of scan. It's more performing a static code analysis. It's as you will see in security, it's there are type of vulnerabilities that can be detected by different type of scan. Some are static, some are dynamic, and it's the ability to have a huge ecosystem of tools that will make sure that your environment is secure.
Are there guidelines, documentation on how to integrate these security tools into DevSecOps pipelines and processes?
Yeah, if you look, you will be able to find in inside the GitHub, you will find tutorial to add this. But as I show you, it's a pretty straightforward on how to integrate. And then if you have specific needs, I found a lot of support just Googling my issue is already well supported. GitHub Action has already more than 10,000 pre-built actions that are available, where you just need to a bit tweak the parameter to make it working. So you should be able to find your material online.
Okay. When will GitHub allow workflows to be checked into a branch other than main master? Different companies follow follow different branching strategy. So can we execute on another branch?
Yeah. So what I didn't show you before because we didn't have time, but you can also find it. This is is one of the you can find this architecture inside the Azure Architecture Center. Is a DevSecOps branch strategy. And this this is something that I recommend to use. You can always configure the pipeline to run in different branch with different type of check. So this is just to give you an idea of a possible DevSecOps branch strategy, but maybe I don't have time to answer now. But as I show you during the demo, the best way is to list your branch. So let's assume you have a SIT, UIT branch, or you have one branch for each of your release 1, release 2. You can just mention those branch here if you want to trigger when you push, or here when you developer create pull request, and the code scanning will be performed. So it's a very super flexible how you want to develop it. It's more like the right level of security, what you want to achieve, and also the type of policy that your organization have in terms of security.
Next question is on Azure DevOps. It looks like code scanning security are integrated in GitHub pipeline. Can they be similarly integrated in Azure DevOps pipeline?
So the advantage of GitHub Advanced Security is that it's a native tool inside. There are equivalent tools that you can integrate in Azure DevOps, but it's not native. So it's not just settings to activate. It's more a matter of look for the equivalent that it should be some code scanning, secret scan, and so on. And then you need to add to your pipeline, and most probably you need to configure the pipeline to run, to schedule it in a way that it will run on all your code every day or at every pull request and so on.
Another question on Azure DevOps. Yeah. Is Azure DevOps being deprecated in favor of GitHub?
No. Azure DevOps and GitHub have different strengths. Since GitHub was acquired by Microsoft, they create a very big team that is working on both the product, but both the product have different roadmap and also different type of user, and also different offering. So it's as of today, our internal direction is that at least for the next 5 to 7 years, we will have both with developing its own set of features with its own roadmap. So yeah, it was. We still have both. I would say for this demo, I thought that it was more interesting to show GitHub, where a lot of developers that are very used to work with open source are more familiar to work with GitHub rather than Azure DevOps.
Okay. And we have some precision from Lohit. Thanks for following up on the question. So the question on the branching strategy was not specifically for the code, but I read, namely, my question is not for running a build on a specific branch, but GitHub does not trigger a workflow if the code is in, let's say, version /001 branch, because GitHub always look at .github workflows folder only in main master. So I think it's about the definition of the workflows as to be within a master or main branch.
Yeah.
And the YAML file is only part of this.
Yeah, but yes, that's the all the workflows should be pushed there.
Yeah. Rohit, if you have any, you need any precision, you can always reach out. That would be, we'll be happy to follow up on that. But yeah. Yes.
Yeah, you can see here our LinkedIn profile. So please, if you want to take any conversation further, if you want to meet for a coffee in Singapore, we are happy to keep this to speak one by one.
All right. Before we end the sessions, can I ask you to move to the next slide, Francesco? Because we are happy to see you again next week on MLOps, as well as the following week will be Francesco again around Visual Studio Code, and GitHub tools to boost your productivity, right? And we have 2 more sessions on data and Sentinel. And finally, we have a survey which really helps us to improve every session. So please give us your feedback. We love to hear your feedback, and the QR code is also listed. Thanks a lot for that. And thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks for joining today's session. And thank you, Francesco, for hosting this amazing session. Thanks.
Thank you, Francois. Thank you all. See you.